Bird populations have been declining globally due to a combination of climate change and habitat degradation. Citizen science is one of the ways we've been able to learn about those changes. ebird is a remarkable resource. It's a platform for the general public to enter their observations of where they see birds. Our lab is using those observations to understand community responses, groups of species responding to climate change. Lane Scher is a PhD student in the lab. She's going to take us out into the field with Rob and Haley. One of our sites in Florida, it's a neon site, and she's going to show us how these observations are made. We'll come back at the end and talk a little bit about how those relate to the vignette for this unit.
A bird, 3 of them, sandhill cranes. It's very exciting. It's called a lifer. Birders call it a lifer when you see a species for the first time. And so this one, I'm gonna call it my lifer. There was a big paper about a year ago that came out that said that in North America we've lost 3 billion birds in the last 40 years. 3 billion with a B. We are clearly losing birds. And so I think now it is really important to have a really full, big understanding of how bird populations are acting.
We have Lane and Jordan in front of us right at the moment, and we're heading out to a lake where we can look for some birds.
We're here at the Ordway Swisher site where we are definitely going to see some birds.
How cool is this? This is amazing.
Not bad.
I am Lane Scher. I'm a PhD student at Duke, and I work in Jim Clark's lab. I am a community ecologist, and so I study the way that species interact and how species interactions will change with climate change, and a lot of that focus is on birds and forest communities.
I'm always interested in the why. Why would you collect bird data like this? And so that is the question I asked Lane.
Right. We know that bird populations are declining in a lot of parts of the world, and especially in the US, and we know this from lots of long-term data sets that have been collected for decades. And a lot of those data sets are collected in really structured ways, so we have once a year someone will go out to these locations, the same locations every year, and survey what birds are there. And that's really useful for looking at long-term changes, but for more fine-scale things like migration patterns or behavioral patterns, you need really a lot more high-resolution data, and so that's why we look at citizen science data like ebird, where anyone can just go out and look at birds and enter it into their ebird app, and then scientists can use that for really important research. This is a chart showing how much data has been submitted to ebird since it started in 2002. And so here we are in 2020. This is from the end of 2019, and you can really just see a crazy increase in the number of observations. This is in millions. So you can see it changes, it increases over time, and then also you kind of see 2 peaks within every year. And because during migration, when there's really great species out, you'll have a lot more people out looking at birds, and so that's when you get these really nice peaks. So we're here today to learn how to use the ebird app and see some neat birds, and then I'll enter it into the ebird app on my phone, and then it'll be available for scientists to use with all sorts of other ebird data from around the country.
But before we get into the details of the app, I wanted Lane to show us exactly how to identify a bird and what we're looking for.
It can be really hard to look at a bird and try to identify it, especially when you're first starting. As you get more experienced, you'll learn certain areas to look at that can be really useful for identifying species. So some good ones on the face, you can look for a different crown color, which is just right on the top of the head. There's this lower space between the bill and the eye, which can be a really distinguishing feature for a lot of species. An eye line you can look at breast color or rump color. And then wing bars are really important for a lot of species and are generally pretty easy to see. You can also look for a crest, which a cardinal is a really good example. You can have 2 species that look really similar except for in just one area, and so it's really important to be able to know where on the bird to look so that you can actually tell them apart.
Now let's show you exactly how to use these apps and how you might do a bird survey yourself.
I have them right here. The first one is ebird. So we open that up, it gives us today's date and the time. And then we can choose if we want to record our track as we're walking or not record. So I'm going to leave that on because that's useful information, and then just click Start Checklist. And now it gives us this list, and we can start typing in species as we see them. So a few minutes ago, I saw 3 anhingas sitting around this lake, so I'm just going to go ahead and put those in. So I can type in anhinga, and as I start to type it in, it comes up. I'll click on anhinga, type in 3, and then say done. So now we have anhingas logged in our checklist. And then I also spotted a white bird over there that I couldn't quite identify. So what I'm going to do is switch over to the Merlin app. And this one is also very straightforward. Just click on Start Bird ID. It'll look for our location. It just found our location, so we can click Current Location. If it doesn't find your location, you can just type it in. And it's pretty easy. So we saw the bird today. You can change this date if it's a bird that you saw last week. Next. These sizes that it gives you range from sparrow-sized or smaller to goose-sized or larger, with a couple of options in between. So this was a pretty large bird across the lake, so I'll choose goose-sized or larger. Next. And then you can choose up to 3 colors. This one I just saw white. It looked pretty solidly white, so I'll just click white. And then next. And finally, what was the bird doing? In this case, it was waiting on the edge of the lake over there. So now we click Identify, and it'll give us a list of birds. This is what I thought it was. A great egret is the first option. We can scroll through and look at some other photos of a great egret. We can look down the list. It says maybe it was a wood stork. I didn't see a dark face on that one, so I don't think I'm going to rule that one out. Could have been a snowy egret. I think it was too large for that, or a white ibis. I didn't see that pink face. So you can go through and kind of eliminate different options, and then once you've decided, I think it's this great egret, you can click This is my bird, and then it'll say, do you want to report this with eBird? And I'll say yes. Take me to eBird. And now we're back in the eBird app. I saw 1 great egret. Done. And now I have this great egret also logged in my eBird checklist.
Fantastic. Easy peasy.
Easy peasy.
Yeah. All right, now to the data.
This is from the big science paper last year that showed that 3 billion birds had been lost from North America in the last 40 years or so. And so that's what this is showing here, is just a huge decrease in birds, almost 3 billion total. And then it also breaks it up by habitat. So within each habitat, there's kind of a different change in bird abundance. And the biggest loss was in grassland bird species, and a lot of this was due to habitat loss because we're converting a lot of grassland to agricultural areas. And then we really see pretty large declines across most habitats, and then there's a very small increase in population size of wetland bird species. So this map I really like because it shows, I mean, first of all, it's just beautiful, but it's showing the migratory patterns of about 100 different bird species. And each point making up one of these lines is the center of the birds on a single day. And so we can see from one point to the next where the center of those birds has moved. And so the color is showing the time of year. So we have dark blue is showing January, which is a lot down in South America. And then coming up into June, which is this nice green and yellow, they'll shoot right up into North America, spend some time here, and then come back down to South America. And this is a really incredible figure because this high resolution data really can only come from a huge data set like eBird, where we're monitoring all species all the time, all across really both of these continents.
In the vignette that's paired with this video, Lane Scher takes us through how you use the observations she showed us with analyses that we can use to understand bigger questions. That vignette specifically takes up the topic of when hurricanes move through and displace shorebirds inland, how far does that go, what species are affected, and how long does it take them to recover? I hope this video has helped you to understand how eBird observations are obtained and then how they can contribute to some of these bigger questions in science.